Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Arise Plus Philippines session on enhancing support for youth-led startups to ensure a resilient recovery, which is organized by the International Trade Center. I am Mais Alconcel, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I am currently the National Project Coordinator of the Arise Plus Philippines project. And just to provide you an overview about the Arise Plus Philippines, it is a 4-year project covering from March 2021 to February 2025, which aims to foster inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction in the Philippines by strengthening trade performance and competitiveness. It is funded by the European Union in partnership with the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry and implemented by the International Trade Center, a joint agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization that fully supports the internationalization of MSMEs. The project provides a platform to bring together various stakeholders in the Philippines, the government, business support organizations, the business sector to discuss, share insights, and collaborate in helping MSMEs, including women and young entrepreneurs, to venture in overseas markets. And as we all know, MSMEs is very crucial in the Philippines because it represents about 99% of businesses in the Philippines. So the project provides support on various areas, trade and market intelligence, strengthening the environment, the policy environment, supporting business support organizations, even supporting women and the young entrepreneurs to make sure that it's inclusive and sustainable. So without further ado, I would like to call on Mr. Mauricio Salini, head of the trade section of the EU delegation to the Philippines, to officially open our session. Mr. Salini, please.
Thank you. Can I speak now? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, very good. So good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me today to the opening of this important activity. Dear organizer, participants, and panelists, as you know, the European Union and the Philippines have a long history of partnership and cooperation in trade and economic development. I'm therefore very happy to be here today at the opening of this Startup Week aimed at enhancing support for youth-led startups to ensure a resilient economy. Today's activity is one more concrete example of the support that the European Union through Arise Plus Philippine project is providing to the Philippines in fostering inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction by improving the country's trade performance and competitiveness. This is all the more important these days as all world economies have suffered from the pandemics and the difficult economic recovery is at the moment underway. COVID-19, in fact, has caused negative disruptions to all our economies, especially the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. But the disruption can and must be fought back with de-escalated technological innovation. We now witness emergence of digital economies, including the farming, manufacturing, and the service sector. So it is important to acknowledge this. In the Philippine economies, these sectors contribute to around 60% of its GDP. Developing and emerging economies must embrace the possibilities offered by the digitalization in order to become resilient and recover from the economic impact of COVID-19 pandemics. Tapping into the young population is crucial in this endeavor. Startups and young companies, which are generally small or micro, are the primary source of net job creation in many countries and are the driving force of innovation and sustainability in the private sector. With the pandemic, there are losers and winners. So providing support for all youth-led business is a must, especially from the provinces to the capital. Without this approach, which supports urban and rural youth, the recovery will not be sustainable, as well as further exacerbate existing economic disparities. The youth need to be supported in their desire to set up businesses. This means ensuring that youth have access to the right type of support at every stage of their entrepreneurial journey, from ideation to internationalization, as well as enabling business environment. Therefore, the ITC Network Analysis and Ecosystem Map initiative and exercises under the Philippine Arise Plus project are important milestones on the road to recovery. Thank you also to the organizers, and I wish you a productive discussion that could bear fruits in the future youth entrepreneurial endeavors. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mauricio, for that very motivating opening remarks. And I like that you highlighted young entrepreneurs. Young entrepreneurs, as you said, they are the primary source of net creation in many countries and driving force of innovation and sustainability in the private sector, which is definitely our topic for today's session. So I would now like to call on our speakers, and I'm very excited to introduce them for this panel discussion. So may I call on Assistant Secretary Napoleon K. Wanilio Jr. and the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry on Competitiveness and Innovation Group. Aseknap, please.
Thank you very much, Msmes. And of course, thank you very much to International Trade Center for sponsoring this. On behalf of Undersecretary Rafaelita Aldaba, again, I say thank you as well on behalf of the DTI Competitiveness and Innovation Group. My name is Napoleon Wanilio, and one of the things that kind of interests me in this session is that I myself am an entrepreneur. You know, I'm also an academic, a scientist. I have a PhD in agriculture from Cornell and taught at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and at Nanyang Technological University. And so I do know what it is to be an academic. At the same time, I'm a government policymaker, so I do know how government works. At the same time, I'm a businessman, and so I do know how it is to, engage in this new enterprise. So so the perspectives that I bring is that of an academician, as a government policymaker, and as a businessman. Thank you, Mas.
Thank you, Asif. Now, you have a very interesting background, I would say, and I'm sure your insights here in our discussion will be very valuable, given that you're now with the government. And our next speaker or panelist is Miss Katrina Chan from Idea Space QBO.
Hi, good afternoon, Mace. Thanks for having me here, and good afternoon to everyone tuning in for Philippine Startup Week. So I hope you've enjoyed all the morning sessions and continue to enjoy our talk. Again, I'm Kat Chan. I'm the Executive Director of Idea Space Foundation. We're also the force behind QBO Innovation Hub, which is actually, it stands for the Bahay Kubo, and it's a bayanihan effort to get, just like Philippine Startup Week, together with the DTI, of course, as represented by ASECNAP, DOST, DICT, JP Morgan Idea Space, and, of course, the ITC, the EU, and UN Youth. So I'll talk more about this later. I won't plug too much now, but we do have a ton of programs to support the youth and entrepreneurs. We're here to support you, and we have so many programs in store for you. And we have been working so closely with the DTI and the EU and ITC, the UN, to make this happen for you guys. So I'm really excited to be part of this session, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kat. A study conducted by the ITC recently actually highlighted the importance of business support organization in making sure that the MSMEs are connected, not just locally but internationally. So you
100% agree. I mean, we are not the stars here. It's really the entrepreneurs. It's you guys, the startups that want to build things. But just know that there's all of these resources here to support you and make your ideas happen.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. Our next speaker is Mel Nava, who is the founder of One Export. Mel?
Hi, Miss. Nice to be here. Nice to be with, and of course, our esteemed panel of judges. We're of course One Export is a one-stop end-to-end platform helping small and medium businesses export, and we hope to be able to share, what we've been able to do, especially during the pandemic, to all of you here.
Thank you, Mel. Yeah, so we're complete from government, business support organization, and youth entrepreneur. So, I'm sure it will be a very productive discussion. For our audience, our participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to put your comments on the chat box. I think we have a chat box there. So please feel free to put your comments there and we'll be happy to answer, or we can ask our speakers here to answer your questions. Okay, so my first question would be directed to ASICNAP, DTI. So ITC conducted this global business survey last year, and it has been found that MSMEs are particularly vulnerable to the repercussions of the crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. And they say that 2 out of 3 small companies are strongly affected. 86% of micro firms are at risk of closing permanently within 3 months, with youth-led enterprises being at high risk. So my question would be, what role does the Department of Trade and Industry play in supporting youth entrepreneurs so they can play a role in the post-COVID recovery?
Yeah, thanks, Mels, for that question. As you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be post-COVID, because even from the get-go, the Department of Trade and Industry, and that was even before I joined officially the DTI, we were already helping the Department of Trade and Industry through USAID Stride in coming up with a roadmap, and it's called the Innovation Entrepreneurship Roadmap. And one of the main features of this roadmap is that we were really trying to plot the various key or salient actors, that is involved, or that can be, I should say, vigorously involved in this whole innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem. And hence, I think one of the outputs of that roadmap was the formation of the so-called regional inclusive innovation centers, where certainly youth entrepreneurship is encouraged, of course, through the various instrumentations of the government, such as TESDA, DepEd, CHED, of course, the Department of Science and Technology. But the whole idea is that whether it's post-COVID or pre-COVID, the whole idea of innovation and entrepreneurship should have been like part of the culture, embedded in the culture from the very beginning, so that at least it provides us, I think, with a scaffolding already to kind of prepare us for any kind of, I should say, situation such as what happened in the past 2 years. So I think that kind of mission continues, fostering that innovation and entrepreneurship culture, and of course, mobilizing all sorts of actors in the regions as well as nationally on how best to inculcate this whole culture of entrepreneurship, of course, particularly among the young. But fostering entrepreneurship is not without context, Mace. It's in the context as well of the whole educational system, what we teach our children in school or our youth in school. And so that also becomes part and parcel of the whole discourse in the innovation entrepreneurship roadmap that we crafted with the DTI, or I should say the DTI has crafted. I think this must have been like 3.5 years ago. Yeah. So I think that's for me, how best did the DTI prepare us for this kind of situation? I think from the beginning, even pre-COVID times, there was already an intent, an earnest intent on the part of government to really prepare entrepreneurs, particularly the youth. As I have said, also mentioning the fact that nearly about 400,000 of them are in our school system. And so I think at the time, the DTI was already sponsoring technopreneurship. I'm pretty sure Ms. Kachan is very much aware of this one, in developing this kind of courses. among our in school as well as out of school youth. And I think right now even Tesla is coming up with an aggressive out of school youth entrepreneurship program. So all of these things makes doesn't even have to be post-COVID. I think we should have begun thinking about entrepreneurship a long time ago. So, but we're trying to continue that now, especially now, of course, given the kind of situation that we face.
Yeah. Thanks, Asik. Now, I agree actually. Yeah. So entrepreneurship, it shouldn't just be because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but yeah, it has started ever since. And I came from DTI, so I would know how DTI have been trying to promote entrepreneurship. And but I guess just because of this COVID-19 pandemic, when everything becomes digitalized and everything, so I guess there is somehow some changes that happen because of this COVID-19 pandemic, or probably it has accelerated the need for entrepreneurship, I would say, or digitalization. So my next question would be directed to Kat. Kat, how does QBO Idea Space support youth-led businesses to identify opportunities for success, including those regionally and internationally?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mace. Just to echo though, like Asik Nap's point, yeah, with great problems comes great opportunities. And if anything, I hope this conference teaches all of you that are watching that, you know, there are solutions to be built because of this pandemic. But to answer your question, Mace, no, I think we approach it in three ways at Idea Space. First is to grow the community of startups. The second is to develop our founders. And the last but not the least is to collaborate with the ecosystem and work with partners, right? So, and I'll go very quickly through some of the programs that I think might be relevant to this question. Of course, I do want to emphasize that because of the support of organizations like DTI, ITC, and the UN, right? Like we are able to offer all of these things for free to you guys, right? So just like Startup Week, you're able to sign up without paying a dime. For our aspiring entrepreneurs, the same way. So I guess I'll start with the end first in terms of collaborate. I think it's really important. I don't talk about like the reports that we're publishing. There's so much information online now. And when you're thinking about sort of global expansion, you have to arm yourself with the knowledge about what are the opportunity spaces that are out there. So there's a number of studies also, like in different formats, in videos, in papers, and reports, right? So like if you're an aspiring business person, like there's definitely a lot of room for you to check out, like what are the places where there is the biggest need. Of course, combining that with validating it with your own kind of experience. I guess in terms of developing startups, again, as I mentioned, a lot of free programs, right, to again help you identify the places where you can expand. We have a lot of mentors as well, including experienced entrepreneurs that are there to help you with actually setting up your business, coming up. I mean, our co-working space isn't technically online now because of COVID, but still, like, we're still here to kind of help you with your business plans and actually executing as a founder. And maybe Mel can talk about that later. And most importantly, like in terms of growing, right? Like I think especially with the youth, you're the future, and we need more of us to like just get started and try out your business ideas. So we've been collabing actually with the Yay program for quite some time. We have something really exciting coming up, including the Boost classes. But we have the Academy program if you're in school. So there's so many available sort of classes, workshops you can join. We're organizing this in different communities throughout the Philippines, including with our community advocates. As I mentioned, the technology business incubators in your schools, right, and through our academy program are there. So if you're a young person and you're looking to try something out and checking out like international markets, like there are so many programs that you have to check out. And I guess final point, right, like the biggest reason that startups fail to raise venture funding, according to some studies, apart from like luck and timing, I suppose, is that they didn't capture a big enough market. So as entrepreneurs, as startups, you need to dream bigger. You need to have a big target addressable market. And by default, right? Like, yes, 100 million people in the Philippines sounds huge, but think about the EU, think about global expansion from day one. Think about the big problems you can solve. And, if you're looking at how to do that, the nuts and bolts, we're here to help you, but start with that premise of thinking big and thinking international.
Thanks, Kat. And I'm sure our audience, our participants are very happy to hear what you said because they have some options for them. Okay, so my next question would be directed to Mel. Mel, your startup supports MSMEs to export, right? So
Yes,
why
yes.
why is your startup focused on MSMEs, and why do you
Well,
think that's very important?
Well, for one, MSMEs contribute, or at least before the pandemic, no, contribute to 90% of total or 99% of total businesses in the Philippines. We all know, as mentioned by ASICNAP, that they were the most vulnerable and hit during the pandemic, right? So we've seen them really shut down their business, right, from restaurants to even small manufacturing businesses, right? When we were looking into this, a lot of things were in play, right? A lot of them shut down because of cash flow issues and funding issues. They weren't able to get enough funding to support their businesses, and it's really a direct result of sales, right? Because retail shut down, eventually they couldn't get sales to eventually grow their business, right? And I guess for us, it's a problem that we're trying to solve, because we don't want small and medium businesses to shut down the next time that another pandemic or another problem happens, right? We want them to be resilient, but in order for them to be resilient, they have to be globally competitive. For you to be globally competitive, you have to be export ready. So you have to have all of the documents in order, right? All of the all of your shipping documents in order, and your product has to be export quality. I guess the lesson that we've had during the pandemic was really to provide value. No? So if you're a startup, you don't have to be in the same space as we are, but really, if you give value to small and medium enterprises, they will pay for your services, right? Because especially for SMEs, they will not just pay, they won't just pay for, say, a subscription for the heck of it, right? They need to be able to see value. They need to be able to see results, right? And if you're able to provide that, you're actually serving 99% of the total businesses here in the Philippines. You can actually have a market and survive as a startup during this pandemic.
Thanks, Mel. A follow-up question to that, because during the COVID-19 pandemic, ICT services, the ICT technologies actually kept MSMEs running amid the COVID-19 induced lockdowns. So it helped them so much in terms of their processes. So how do you use tech innovation to facilitate export processes? Can you give an example of a small business that has succeeded in exporting through your assistance?
Sure. Maybe first I'll answer the first part of your question, right? How did tech enable exporting or cross-border trade in general, right? Before the pandemic, our industry was heavily reliant, say, on trade shows, right? Like, so, for example, DTI would host these major business missions to go to Paris or Japan, right? And you would spend thousands of pesos to be able to get that one sale, right? Of course, during the pandemic, what happened was you actually don't, because travel was shutting down, right? You don't need to go abroad to get a buyer abroad, right? So what happens is, if you are, if you have a Facebook page, if you have your website up and running, right, you could get a buyer abroad, right? And we've seen that. We've seen small and medium businesses on our platform ship to several different countries, even as far as, say, Finland or Denmark, and as near as Hong Kong or Taiwan, right? You've seen the increase in total orders. But for suppliers, for example, right, for manufacturers or SMEs. Before the pandemic, we used to go to trade shows also. So like local trade shows, go local, or even like go to like the regions themselves to onboard SMEs. With the pandemic and with being everyone being online, all they had to do was register on our platform, right? We can onboard via Zoom or Google Meets, and we can actually process their documents remotely, and they can get all of their documents in order, right? So I think I guess to answer the first part of your question, obviously technology has really sped up the growth for businesses to go online and to transact online. But maybe to give you an example, we have a small medium business in the Gupan, where we did everything from scratch. No? So we processed everything from their FDA licenses. All they had to do was submit their documents to our platform, right? We were able to process their documents in, say, as fast as 30 days, even get them a US FDA in as fast as 2 weeks. And then we were able to sell them to markets abroad, right? So right now we're able to sell them to different online and offline stores. So offline stores like, say, Seafood City, which is a supermarket chain store in the States, and we're able to sell them to as well as like different resellers on Amazon and eBay. So I think overall that process for them took them 5 months, whereas if they had to go through the nitty gritty of exporting, they would have to at least spend 2 years, right? We've been able to speed up that process for them, and of course now they are thriving. They used to be like a 6-man team in Pangasinan. Now they've hired more people during the pandemic. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Yeah, indeed, digital services actually has really increased efficiency and reduced costs for businesses. Also, it has provided new opportunities for businesses. I have this very favorite example here in the Philippines. We're in the ITBPO partner with the healthcare sector. So now they're providing this, what they call telehealth, telemedicine services. US is a number one market for that. And for me, that's an example of how digital services, ICT technologies, and how our businesses can adapt to such crisis. So the capacity to change is very important as well, in ensuring that they can compete and become resilient. My next question would be addressed to Kat and ASICNAP. What are the most common knowledge gaps? This is for Kat. Gaps that you see amongst young entrepreneurs, and how QBO Idea Space are addressing these gaps. And for ASICNAP, which is kind of related to the question I addressed to Kat, um, could you share with us which key struggles and barriers do you see youth-owned businesses are facing, both locally and globally?
Sure.
So
Maybe
maybe,
I'll start like on the knowledge gaps, right? Before I even get to the formal knowledge gaps, I think one thing that the youth need and is a network, right? So I think events like this exist because we want to be able to connect you and give you the same opportunities as someone that's been around the sun more times, right? So I think organizations like us again are here to facilitate, and please do make the most of the opportunities you have to network through these platforms to build those connections, make those sales, right? But I guess to really kind of go into your question about knowledge gaps, at the end of the day, like I think it's still about experience. It's not just because of being young, right? Like you might even think that slightly older founders, but like first time founders, and many of us are, right? Like just don't have maybe the experience to kind of navigate some of the challenges, because honestly, as sexy or whatever as Elon Musk makes the whole starting up thing seem, running a business is very hard. And at different phases, you will need to learn different things, right? So maybe in the beginning, it's more about how to recruit the right team. At some point, it's about how to raise funding or keep your business alive. And even later on, you start dealing with once you're going global, right? Like you're dealing with the things that Mel was talking about earlier, right? Like paperwork and compliances and paying your taxes and like all of these like kind of crazy things. And if it's your first time going through any of that, that's crazy hard, right? So how are we filling those gaps? Again, we try to do it, we try to address the problems at different stages. There's no one solution for all of you, and we understand that. And that's precisely why, like we have all of these programs, about 100 of them a year that, again, we're offering for free for entrepreneurs. One thing I do want to highlight specifically is the Boost program that we're sending more information on soon. And that's specifically around like how to get your early stage ideas to be international ready, right? But, apart from that, again, I'd take up way too much time if I talked about all of the different things. But just know that, do your research, but like at the different phases of your business, don't be a fool, right? Like you will have problems. So, turn to experts, or at least reach out and make the most of these opportunities. And I think the great thing about like platforms like QBO, like Philippine Startup Week, right, is that we're working with experienced founders. So you'll be surprised by how much your fellow Pinoy founders, maybe ones that have done this before, are willing to mentor and help you out. So don't be shy, ask for that help. And that's probably the best advice I can give anyone, because like even I don't have all the answers, but someone in the community has gone through this before. You're not alone, and they're here to help you. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Yeah, yeah, true. That's very true. There will always be someone out there to help you. Asik now, please.
Yes, I think Kat has wonderfully summarized all of these things. But the operative word really is networking, and also being open to the learning experiences of others. But at the same time, I think being able to really spot the right problem and offer a design centered solution. And also I think we also cannot I should say overemphasize the need for an empathetic I should say business planner or entrepreneur. I know of this story of a couple of Stanford grads who came to the Philippines not knowing anyone and went to Bicol. And as a Bicolano, I met them in the bus one day, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And they said that they're trying to find an alternative to styrofoam. And basically, they started talking to coconut farmers and came up with this husk as an alternative to, I should say, the styrofoam. Came up with a design thinking approach to it. But all it takes really is also a lot of talking and a lot of, I should say, immersing with uh, customers and possible collaborators. And Kat was already talking to us about collaborators. And hence, I think one of the things that we do at the DTI is to also form these communities of networks. So it can be a youth network, it can be a network of students, a network of faculty, a network of seasoned or mature entrepreneurs. But the whole important thing is to kind of know what things are going on in the community and who's doing what resources are there, and to keep on asking questions and never to be afraid in seeking possible solutions to problems that you may be entertaining. But I should say too, but having a much more customer centered or customer directed type of thinking is important. So yes, passion is good, but there's got to be a buyer for that passion. uh, you must be able to put monetary value, and at the same time be able to double up the capital that you accumulated later on. But sometimes I think it's the dreaming kind of takes precedence over customer discovery and making sure that at some point you really have to make money. Not in a very bad way, but all I'm trying to say is that then I think too, I'm talking to Kat Chan, who's a scientist herself, but at the same time, I should say one of the things that we also have to inculcate among our youth entrepreneurs is that there is such a thing too as domain expertise. You have to cultivate a certain respect for domain. Let's say if you're an engineer, cultivate a respect for it. If you're a chemist, cultivate a respect for it, because those are your scaffoldings to finding solutions to problems that you might encounter. But having said that, collaboration is important. So the chemist collaborating with an artist, with a creative designer, the material scientist and the physicist collaborating with somebody who knows how to communicate with
Oh.
I lost. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This whole multidisciplinary perspective has to be fostered among youth entrepreneurs as well. You know, one of the things that I keep on emphasizing, having been director for research at the Commission on Higher Education before, is that we have to stop just asking for grants just so we can publish papers or attend international conferences. We have to basically use those grant monies to be able to find solutions to problems that exist all over, and problems in the Philippines abound, and at the same time be able to see if we can start coming up with solutions that can sell, you know, instead of having. Can you just imagine? Before, I think yearly the government allocation or investment was around 100 million, at least for the Commission on Higher Education, and that's annually. But as a businessman, 100 million pesos, and for what outputs, so you begin to wonder, whether that's the kind of direction we should be taking. And I think, Mais, some of the things that you've been telling us about product discoverability for coconut, which hovers around 40% compared to about 75 to 80% in neighboring economies, I think those are some of the insights that we got from ITC, and which I've been trying to use as a feedback to most of our faculty in the state universities and colleges, to kind of encourage our students to look beyond the 40%. What else is there? And like what Kachan is saying, you know, is there a market beyond your community? Is there an EU market for that? Is there a larger market for it? Those are the things that we have to challenge our youth. Sago is fine, you know, but there there must be something beyond that, you know. Buko pa is okay, but what exactly are Indonesians, Malaysians, Thais, and Vietnamese are doing with their coconuts? Those are things that we want to challenge our youth about. And
Asik
but
na,
that's a big
thank you so
struggle.
much.
It's a big struggle for the Philippines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for mentioning about that, because we have a question from the audience. So it's for you. In
Oh,
ITC, how do we connect to international market to get products and raw materials from our indigenous people?
how do? Oh, that's a kind of loaded first. How do you connect the what was that again, Mace? Please.
How do we connect to international market to get
Yeah.
products and raw materials from our indigenous people?
Yeah, great. One of the things that we tried to do at the DTI was that I asked our foreign trade attaches and our trade commissioners exactly what are the needs in the international markets. What's the need in California? What's the need in Spain, Portugal, Taiwan, France, etc., etc. you know so but indeed the indigenous part is just a source part, right? In the whole chain, that's just a source part. It's making value out of what you can get from the source. And I think and in translating that into something that's value laden or that's value added, we also develop the sources of those products, the sources of those raw materials. And I think that's one good thing about really looking at, a wider market, a wider, I should say, network of possible customers for some of our products. Our trade commissioner in San Francisco, for instance, was talking about natural salt, you know, and of course, Pangasinan being the source of salt in the Philippines. One of the things, Kat, I was asking them is that how do you make sure it's pure? You know, apart from the fact that it is indigenously prepared, but how do you know that it's free from plastics or other, or how do you know make sure it's free from other impurities such as mud? you know do they have a way of detecting it? Do they have a way of containing the dampness or the moisture of the salt, considering that it can be quite a big value in 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 organic obsessed, let's say, California. you
Just
know
to quickly
But-
jump into this aspect, Nap, no,
yeah.
like you were talking about the interdisciplinary thing. I think this is one of those
Mm.
perfect examples of that. There
Mm.
is a technical solution to kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
look at the purity, for
yeah,
example, quote unquote, no,
yeah.
of the chemical composition.
That's
But at the
right.
same time, it's also a marketing problem. It's a creatives
Yeah,
problem to be
yeah,
able to
yeah, yeah,
communicate that value, no, and to honestly at the end of the day charge premium for it, diba? Like
that's
because
right,
it
that's
came
right.
from the volcanic salt flats mud of Pangasinan, right? Like,
That's
and
right,
that
that's
people
right.
are willing to now pay like 100 times more for
Yeah.
100 grams of salt. Like, so I think it's both a technical solution and a marketing creatives, business people thing. And we need all of our breast minds kind of working together in
You're
these
right.
kinds of things to extract that value, so I just thought that was a fantastic
Yeah, because
example, and something
Kat,
as simple as salt, diba?
I was asking the vice president for research and extension of Pangasinan State University, because they say that that's one of their research and extension products. But I said, how do you control for dampness? How do you control for moisture? And one of the answers that he gave me, oh, we kind of rely on how it was indigenously prepared. I think which there's a premium for that, but I think there's got to be more than that, means. So the indigenous, yes, it can be marketed as such, it can be communicated as such, you can put value to that, but at the same time you can also put science and technology to bear on it, to just make sure that it even gets greater value, like what Kat is saying. She's the
Yeah.
material scientist, so she.
I realize both of you are scientists. So
Yeah, sorry if
sometimes
you geeked out, audience. Like, scientists unite. But yeah,
Yeah.
but I agree with your multidisciplinary approach. You have the science and technology. You have the creative industries, which ASICNAM is also
Yeah.
trying to enhance, right? Develop. There's so many aspects of it. And just to mention about the sin, the salt.
Yeah.
I actually just promoted this on ITC recently found out that salt actually has high export potential. And I even forwarded that to our export marketing bureau to make
Yeah.
sure that
Yeah.
they
and even
capture it.
think about that, say, a Kumu or something, no? Get a live streamer, an influencer to talk about how the salt, like, made my skin 100 years younger. And, like, that's gold, right? Like, but we all need to work together to make it happen. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, we can't be inside those.
It brings me to ask Mel a question from our audience as well on cultural barrier on entrepreneurship. Filipinos seem to be a relatively more risk averse, coupled with being very collectivist. People who set themselves apart are always met with a derisive ikaw na. So people who try their own thing and start businesses are usually discouraged. Any ideas on how we can address that cultural barrier?
I guess, of course, one, starting a business is really hard. So for one, when you start, no, people will always tell you you can't do it, right? Or this is not going to work out, right? I think every entrepreneur has always been told that, right? So it's not just you. I also have been told that several times, right? And I'm sure every other successful entrepreneur has been told this. No, I guess for me, what I personally do is to focus on my customers and my people, right? As soon as I focus on this, right, everything else does not matter. So whatever they say about, discouraging me to do the business, right? A lot of people have told us stuff like, you're not going to be a tech company, or, this is not going to work if there are this and this solutions, right? But, we have customers that are using our products. We have customers that are paying for our services. And, we use this as fuel to grow, right? So many people will be telling you a lot of things, right? And if you focus on these two things, I think you will definitely carry on and grow. I guess, of course, I understand the risk averseness of Philippine entrepreneurs, right? And we've seen this, right? A lot of them have not taken funding because they either want so much equity, or a lot of them, have just decided to give up after not hitting these certain milestones for their startup, right? I think for me, I guess for us, our main driving force was of course, when we were like 2 to 3 people, the risk was lower, right? Now we have about 30 people in the team, and of course, the risk is higher. And again, we think about the people and the customers that we help every day, and to try and make sure that we don't die, or we survive whatever challenge that is on our way. So I guess for me, it's really like, I mean, at the end of the day, the driving force for us is what value can we give to our customers? How can we best provide for our people? But also, like, we want to be able to represent the Philippines, right? There are very few Philippine startups that survive and thrive, and to survive the pandemic is a gift, right? I think whoever is here, if you're a startup and you have survived, you have to give yourself a pat on the back, because it really is hard to work through the pandemic, right? And that on its own is a gift. It's an achievement. And so for me, even if people are telling you things that you can't do it, understand that the fact that you've survived this far means that you're good, right? And we hope to see more of you. We hope that you represent the Philippine startup ecosystem, because we need more people to thrive and represent the Philippines.
Thanks, Mel. There's another question. Probably this is for Kat. How do you boost your confidence when creating networks and connections? How to start contacting or communicating with people? So,
Honestly, I don't really have great advice for this. I used to be kind of shy, but at some point, you just kind of had to get over it. I think, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. And for the most part, I will say now we're lucky as Pinoys that our fellow entrepreneurs are sympathetic and generally helpful, I would say. Like, they're not here to judge you. And honestly, hindi nga tayo masyadong competitive. I think, like many entrepreneurs, especially if they've been there, like they were also like nobody succeeded without going through countless rejections also, right? And if you can sort of leapfrog some of these mistakes, I know they're rooting for you. So it's hard, like, to just kind of, sabi nga nila sa Pinoy, magpakapal ng mukha, no? Pero I think you need to do that. You just need to ask for what you want or need, diba? You need to ask for help and be open, listen to advice. Like, I know, like, syempre, if you've been working really hard on an idea, for example, you're so in love with it already, and like any pintas, diba? Any criticism to your baby is so heartbreaking for you. But being open to that, just listening to people. Again, at the end of the day, though, I must say that as the entrepreneur, as the founder, as a CEO, it's your decision. It's your company to run. But, be open, or at least listen to the feedback, especially from your customers, as Mel was saying. Kasi, there's so many nuggets of wisdom there. Like, I mean, I've met with hundreds of founders. So many of them have pivoted, have succeeded precisely because, like, they listened to what their customers were actually telling them versus what they thought made sense in their heads. So use that experience, use the knowledge of people around you, because you're never probably going to be the smartest person in the room, the richest, the prettiest, or whatever. No, pero that doesn't mean you can't make the most of the resources and people that are out there. And yun nga, friendly naman ang mga Pinoy. So that should be a boost.
yeah, I agree, Kat. Because when I was in Singapore, actually, I was part of this Singapore entrepreneurs in Singapore. And I would say that Filipinos are really very helpful.
Yeah,
they will always share
one thing
their
pa ha, I think sobrang humble din ng mga Pinoy. I don't know if you've heard the saying, fake it till you make it. Pero like in Singapore, in Silicon Valley, like kahit wala pa nga, idea pa lang mayabang na sila eh. Like, I feel like with Filipinos, it's a lot more common for us na sobrang sigurista. Like, it has to be 100% there before we even talk about it. And honestly, as a founder, you have to express your vision. Like, if you don't believe in it, if you don't believe in the possibility of it, like with the magic hands, how can you get people to inspire and get behind you, no? So have some confidence. Like we're all struggling. We're all like putting on like a show, right? But like I'm not saying do a scam, ha. Like that's not my message. But have some confidence, believe in what you can achieve, right? Like and tell people about it. So yeah. Be confident.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, probably this is for all. What industries should young entrepreneurs look into and jump into this new normal? Can you cite some examples? And then related to that, there is this one question: what advice can you give a young breadwinner who wants to launch a startup while providing for their family? Aseknap, let's start with you.
You know, I think there's just no one formula here for me. You know, to begin with, problems abound, and it all starts really. Entrepreneurship starts with a problem, identifying a problem, and of course, you begin with designing a possible solution to that problem. And one of the things too is that, of course, that solution isn't gonna be the solution. As Kat was saying, you might actually pivot to another one, but there are just so many things. So I don't know if it's all about just finding one particular niche that's gonna spell success. As you very well know, Maze, in the whole chain you can basically identify a particular niche. It's not just maybe logistics, it can even be as you know hybridizing seeds, etc. So there's so many things. There's just a matter of really positioning it in the process. But one of the things too that I know about this as an entrepreneur myself is that you should not stop talking. You have to keep on blabbing about it, because in the process, people get to connect you to who's got an experience in this and who's got a possible idea or knowledge or information about this or that. uh, you can't bottle it all up. You really have to be exuberant about these things. No, it doesn't mean that you're exuberant about one thing, you don't have to change the following day. You can, yeah, that's part of being savvy, that's part of being tactical. And I think that's the reason why in the DTI we try to form these communities of we call it innovation entrepreneurship communities, just to kind of get people out of their shell and be less shy or be less embarrassed about asking questions, open up the portals for information, etc. But as I've said, no particular niche for me. I think yeah, I think once you have a good design for a problem you have identified, it's everything is worth trying. You know, and and then we put our both our expertise and creativity in positioning that particular solution.
Thanks, Aseknap. Kat?
Actually, I mean, I super agree with everything Asagnap said, but maybe to add a bit, no. So, in terms of the niche or what industries, I wish I could tell you if I knew, like I'd be a billionaire, I did fit their job. But basically though, like like it's been mentioned a few times, like this idea about listening to the problem, and also Asagnap also mentioned domain expertise, no. So I think you're in the best position to solve a problem that you really understand.
That's right.
So, yun na nga eh, parang there are a lot more places in the world that look like Pasig and Philippines and Palo Alto. And that's why I feel that, people from Pasig and Philippines can come up with solutions for our stuff that people from Palo Alto cannot. So, if you make a bet on yourself and make a bet on what you understand. So, the DTI has these don't know anything about pili nuts, but if someone's gonna build like $1 billion company from pili nuts, it's gonna be these guys, right? It's gonna be people that understand it. So if you're gonna start a business, don't try to get into something just because you've heard it's kind of cool. Like it should be a problem that you deeply understand and that and talk to your customers, listen to them. And that should be your guiding light. On the second question, I actually struggled with that one a bit when I heard it. Yung parang as a breadwinner, how do I get into this? Like, I do, for one, at Kubo, and we'll learn this if you join our classes or boot camps and things like that. There are many ways to validate your solution before, you know, mortgaging your house or whatever, not to like make it happen. So, one of my favorite examples is like hey kuya, my kuya, like the founder, he literally bought like one only SIM from Globe and one from Smart, and he like texted people and did it manually before he actually launched his company and started fundraising for it. And there are many other examples of the hustle like that among our founders. So, yun nga, if you do have the luxury of like being rich and having funding, like go for it. But otherwise, try to explore how do you get the most customer feedback and validation without spending as much. And again, take advantage of programs by the government. We have Venture Filipinas on Friday that's like funding for right? Like there are these things and also other ways to test your idea and get that customer feedback, because at the end of the day, traction speaks louder than words. So many others will invest in your idea if you put in the work, not necessarily in an expensive way, to see that there is customer demand for your product or your service. So yeah.
Thanks, Kat.
Ye-
Mel?
Yeah, I
Probably
guess.
now you can highlight the export part, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for me, like, of course, the industry, I think that is booming right now. And not to be biased to my own industry is, of course, the exporting industry. Cross-border trade is at an all-time high. They say, 49% of the time, if you order in the United States, you're ordering from a different country. So it's obviously an industry, I think, that is booming right now. There's so much opportunity in terms of supply chain, in terms of, fulfilling orders that could be done, right? However, I think I would like to point out that it is still very important to focus on your customers, right? What will your customers pay for, right? And that is the industry you should focus on, right? For example, for me, the reason why I think exporting is relevant is because I was in the export industry for 3 years, right? So you may have different expertise that you could provide to your customers, and they will be able to pay you for. And that niche on its own will be booming, right? We have been told so many times that maybe the total number of SMEs in the Philippines is not relevant, but the total number of SMEs is enough to help us grow our company. So I think that some those things are important, right? And maybe to answer also the question about as a breadwinner, how do you start a startup, right? My journey was, we didn't when we got the idea of One Export and started the idea of One Export, we didn't throw in the towel and just start One Export, right? My former co-founder and I were working our separate jobs. We were working One Export on the weekend, no. And until we got a certain level of traction where people were paying us, and we said, this might make more money if we left our own jobs. That was when we only left our jobs, no. But there are ways, again, as mentioned by Katchan, to validate your idea. For example, for One Export, even to this day, we actually validate through Facebook ads. So, for example, we launched our Ship It model, which is our logistics model, last June. First, through a Facebook ad, we checked, do you want to send your products abroad for a cheaper price? And people flocked our messenger app, even if our website was not up, right? And now, of course, shipit.oneexport.com is up and running. But it's really a way to validate, the business, right? It was a way for us to have grown it without having to spend that much cash. And I think more than getting investment, it's important for you to be sustainable, diba? Because you can get investment, but that can run out, right? If you do not have a sustainable business, if you do not not have customers paying you. And I think that's very, very important as you grow, right? So if you are a breadwinner looking to maybe do a startup in the long run, I think the first thing that you really have to do is make sure that the startup you will be building is sustainable. So of course, when you decide to go full time, you know that it will be able to provide for your family.
Thanks so much, Mel. Anyway, that's the end of our discussion. I hate to say that we need to conclude it, but thanks so much to ASEC NAP, Kat, Mel. This was a very productive and interesting discussion. And of course, I would like to thank our Philippine Startup Week 2021 organizers. Thanks so much for having us. We enjoyed this discussion so much. And of course, I'll be handing over the program to my colleagues Claire and Jenny, who will be discussing about this upcoming program under the Rise Plus Philippines project on youth entrepreneurs. Thanks so much again, everyone.
Thanks so much, Mel. You're an amazing moderator. Really, really appreciate your support on this. Thanks so much to Assistant Secretary Napoleon. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you, Mel. I am completely inspired by the discussions that took place today. I hope everyone in the audience is inspired to go out there and test their ideas and to make them a reality, to get in touch with their customers. So on behalf of the International Trade Center, the organizers of this panel, with support from the EU, I'm really thrilled to be sharing with you all this exciting program that Kat has mentioned a few times during the discussion called the Arise Plus Philippines Yay Boost Accelerator. This is an accelerator just for young entrepreneurs. And by young entrepreneurs, we mean anyone under the age of 35. So for those others in the audience, we know you're still young at heart, but we need to support those young people to get their ideas off the ground and to think big. As Kat said throughout this discussion, we're going to be focusing in this accelerator on really going international and looking and identifying the international markets which can best serve your budding young business. As stated in this discussion as well, small and medium enterprises are the backbones of the Philippine economy, and we really need to be supporting them. And that's why ITC and QBO are working together to bring this acceleration program to life. As we just heard today, the community element, the networking element, and the need to be able to tap into experts, not just from the Philippines, but also from around the world, are critical in supporting youth-led businesses to reach those international markets. And that's why this program will be specifically focusing on that element. So we're really thrilled to be sharing with you in the chat now a pre-sign-up form, as the applications will go live 2022. This 14-week in-depth program will be a great way to, as a young startupper, understand which international markets are best for your business and to set in place a plan for getting there. So if this is interesting to you, please fill in this form so we can keep you updated on the relevant dates and let you know as soon as the application form goes live. And with that, I would just like to say thank you so much once again to our amazing panelists and to the organizers of Startup Week Philippines, QBO and Idea Space. Thank you so much again to Assistant Secretary Napoleon for making the time today to be with us and for inspiring all the youth entrepreneurs in the audience. It was really a pleasure to be with you all today, and looking forward to meeting many of you throughout the course of this ITC Arise Plus Philippines project. And fingers crossed, as soon as this pandemic is over, to coming and meeting you all in person in the Philippines. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your Startup Week.